Peace and blessings. Once again, this is Court in Session Podcast. I'm your host, Justice Hype. No, this isn't the court of law, more like the court of public perception, and more importantly, factual evidence, where at any time you and I can be the plaintiff, the defendant, judge, or juror. And without further ado, I do want to say Happy New Year to those of you in the know as we enter the spring equinox. Been super busy with school, and so haven't been able to keep up the content as consistent and as fluid as I would like. But we're going to work on that as the spring rolls in and summer is coming around the corner. So we'll definitely be in court much more. And without further ado, we're going to get right into this. This might have to be a multiple session, but I had to bring this into the court for very thorough examination. And in my scrolling recently on Instagram, noticing a post, a very, very bold post by an entertainer, dancehall artist, reggae artist by the name of Mr. Vegas, commonly known as Suubi The Warrior, and his very, very bold statement was in reference to Patrice Lumumba and Haile Selassie. But because I don't like to misquote, I will read to you exactly the post made by Mr. Vegas, and I quote: "All you uneducated, deceiving Rastas who worship, venerate, in parentheses, Selassie, just be mindful that he sent the Ethiopian Air Force to participate in this evil act against our ancestor, Patrice Lumumba. May he rot in the hottest part of hell." And then he goes on to tag Muda Baruka. Wow. Very bold, very outlandish statement. And the act that he's mentioning, as there's a picture attached that seems to capture President Lumumba being led by Katangan troops, or actually this looks like a European person. So this might have been the Belgian forces who conspired with Mobutu to later turn him over to the Katangan soldiers and then have him assassinated. But the reason, once again, why I had to bring this into the court is because at this particular time, in my estimation more than ever, we are battling with misinformation throughout the diaspora in all walks of life, as we could see as you know what's happened with the pandemic, politics. We know that there's information and there is a heavy concentration of misinformation that's being injected into the public, and this is why this was very, very alarming to me. And I was left to wonder, because the statement is so bold and false. You know, over the years, Mr. Vegas has made a lot of statements concerning His Imperial Majesty, and I don't know. I try not to take it too seriously, as at the end of the day, he is an entertainer. So I don't know if he says these things in the spirit of entertainment, or B, he's someone with a very serious disdain towards Rastafari, towards Haile Selassie, and he has some type of other nefarious agenda attached to these very bold statements. But I would just like for us, because this what he said, that particular statement, and I would like to touch on a few other damaging and very, very false statements, that he's made in recent times. But a very, very elementary level search of Wikipedia will tell us this, and I quote: "United Nations operation in the Congo. Despite the arrival of UN troops, unrest continued. Lumumba requested UN troops to suppress the rebellion in Katanga, but UN forces were not authorized to do so under their mandate. On July 14th, Lumumba and Kasavubu broke off diplomatic relations with Belgium. Frustrated at dealing with the West, they sent a telegram to the Soviet premier. Lumumba unsuccessfully appealed to the United States and the United Nations to help to suppress the Belgian-supported Katangan secessionists led by Moise Tshombe. Suspicions among Western nations that Lumumba was a communist deepened when he turned to the Soviet Union for assistance. Okay, which, as we know throughout history, is pretty much a death sentence for any African leader or African nation. We saw in the West what Fidel Castro dealt with for being labeled a communist. Mr. Vegas obviously either didn't study, didn't care to study, or understand the context of what was going on in the Congo at this particular time. Congo, as many or most African nations, a history of slavery, bloody genocide, monopolization, and complete abuse of their natural resources and the people itself, right? Through gross human rights violations over years. As we know, King Leopold II had been in a tug of war between the Western world and Russia at that time, as we know to be the Cold War. And so, as we know, Congo being very rich in natural resources that were used in the Industrial Revolution, and also to fight World War I, World War II, and also the World War planned out via Cold War, right, which we're dealing with right now, subsequently. The Congo was a very strategic outpost for both sides, and so they were playing both sides. And Haile Selassie knew this, being the diplomat and the statesman he is, or was, I should say, right? Belgium had helped Ethiopia repel Italian forces not once, not twice. Once during his grandfather Menelik II's reign, and also while he was in exile, right? Belgium, in concert, I believe, with UN forces of Britain and France, helped to repel the Italian forces as they tried to invade and colonize Ethiopia. So it would only be right, once again, put into proper context, Lumumba faced resistance from his own people. Mobutu, his own military general, was against him and working with the Belgian government, right? He made a grave mistake to the Western world by having the nerve to say he's going to nationalize his national resources so that the Western world and outsiders couldn't just plummet and pillage the Congo as they had been for centuries before, right? So this was obviously an issue for the United States, who depended on resources from the Congo, as well as Belgium, who had no interest in seeing them independent or their resources nationalized, right, and withheld from their monopolization. So this obviously put Patrice Lumumba in harm's way. But to insist that he was part of the coup, part of the capture, part of the assassination is grossly false, Mr. Vegas, aka Suubi The Warrior, right? And putting this information out for people to consume is very, very dangerous, okay? Mr. Vegas went on to make statements that, and this was just hilarious. Selassie is an Arab? Yes, Mr. Vegas said that Selassie is an Arab. When Selassie was born outside the city of Harar in Ethiopia, which the last time I checked was considered the Horn of Africa, the cradle of Africa, which you can also find the first and the oldest fossil human remains, I believe, unless they found something new, by the way, which is dated at well over a million years, well over several million years, named Lucy, is found in Ethiopia. Furthermore, when the Europeans found their way into Ethiopia, Abyssinia, their translation of the word Abyssinia was land of the sun burnt faces. And in the book that you see on the screen right now, J.A. Rogers, a very reputable authority on African studies, anyone remotely knowledgeable of African studies knows about J.A. Rogers and the work that he has produced in this book. The Real Facts About Ethiopia. You can see the ancestors, Menelik and His Imperial Majesty's family, and you could see that they're obviously melanated people, original people to the earth. And such statement is just so comical. But yes, folks, he did say that Haile Selassie was an Arab. And I don't even want to spend too much time on that ridiculous statement because, just common sense alone, and once again, simple research allows us to refute that statement. Another statement that he made, Selassie supported slavery and he didn't do anything for African people. Well, that's false as well, as Selassie was the creator of the African Union. Another thing he made statement on was Marcus Garvey's remarks about him being a coward for taking up exile in 1936, which he didn't. Also add in the fact that the Italians were about to completely overrun Ethiopia, and they did something which was unprecedented at the time, which was use poison gas. So the chess move that Emperor Selassie made was to leave, right, and allow Italy to win that battle, but then to return in order to win the war. And I'm sure Marcus Garvey in his later days probably understood this, as he obviously had a tug of war with Haile Selassie, right? The reason he had a lot of disdain for Haile Selassie is because he never reached out to him and never really paid him any mind with his movement of the UNIA, and he felt that he shunned Africans abroad. But this was a farce completely, as we can see, right, with some simple research, that the Tuskegee Airmen, as a matter of fact, John Robinson, the founder of the Tuskegee Airmen, led the Ethiopian Air Force against the Italians, right? That's information that can be found on a surface level through a Google search. Not only did Haile Selassie establish the African Union, he was also a staunch supporter of decolonization in other African countries as well, and spoke out against colonization. Now, another fallacy brought forward by Mr. Vegas was Haile Selassie supported slavery, and he continued slavery in Ethiopia. Before I go any further, I want to make it very clear that this is an objective reasoning coming from someone not from a religious standpoint or trying to defend any particular faith or defend the persons in question by any manner, but just to provide objective and factual information on all those discussed today. And also, I just wanted to reference the New York Times article, September 5th, 1964. Selassie opened a special session on the Congo to urge the African foreign ministers to find a solution. He said, and I quote, "The continent cannot contemplate with equanimity the strife, torn Congo, and await inactive and passive the bloody climax to the tragedy played out. Africa must act now to expunge this running sore." It was essential, he goes on to say, that no friction with neighboring states be permitted to create new difficulties as well. And this was an address to the African Union once again in 1964, in which Belgian representatives were present as well as Congolese representatives. And in closing, I want to end with a reading from The Real Facts About Ethiopia by J.A. Rogers, which was originally published in 1936 and republished in 1982 by the Atlanta University Center R.W. Woodruff Library. So as you can see, the information within is valid enough to be placed in an institution's library for use. And this reading starts at page 19, and the chapter is entitled Slavery in Ethiopia. And I quote, "Slavery in one form or another exists in nearly all of Africa today. It was only in 1928 that the slaves of Sierra Leone, Britain's oldest African colony, were finally freed, or were said to be. In Ethiopia, slavery goes back to the most ancient times. It was also sanctioned by Mosaic law, which Ethiopia still uses. The first slaves in Ethiopia, as elsewhere, were prisoners of war who were unable to pay ransom. These slaves begot slave children. Ethiopia, nearly always at war, continued to accumulate slaves. Since the Ethiopian is a warrior by profession, he shuns other work. Hence, slaves were needed to till the soil. There has also been a demand for slaves in Arabia from time immemorial. It is held that but for this importation of human beings, the Arabian population would become extinct. Today, the majority of slaves imported into Arabia come from Ethiopia and the Sudan. Ethiopian and other Oriental slavery differ widely from American slavery. It is domestic servitude. The slaves, far more than not, become a member of the family. Slaves who have children by the master are not only freed, but the children are treated in all respects like the illegal ones. A son by a slave mother might in time become the head of the family. Many rulers in the Mohammedan Empire, even at the height of its power, had slave mothers. Indeed, these were preferred in order to avoid political meddling by her family. Sometimes these slave mothers were Ethiopian. Menelik, the greatest of the Ethiopian emperors prior to Haile Selassie, had a slave mother named Edgig Ahayo. Ethiopian slavery was never as degrading as American slavery. Beginning with Theodore, succeeding Ethiopian emperors have tried to abolish slavery in vain. It was too ingrained. Moreover, African conditions forced many individuals to seek masters in order to get food and protection. Others voluntarily went to Mecca as pilgrims in order to sell themselves. When Haile Selassie became regent, he took steps to wipe out slavery. It was moreover one of the conditions by which Ethiopia was admitted to the League. It was impossible, however, to bring about immediate emancipation because large numbers of slaves had no homes. Turned adrift, they would become either beggars or bandits. Many also refuse to leave their masters. Italy herself praised Haile Selassie for his fight against slavery when he had done far less than now. Count Bonin Longuerre, Mussolini's delegate to the League of Nations, said, "One must, however, pay tribute to particularly Rastafari, now Haile Selassie, present heir to the throne, a prince of broad views who is open to modern ideas and in which praise one can mention the Decree of November 1918, reinforcing all previous edicts and punishing slave traffic severely. As regards the conditions of the slaves, a gradual humanizing of habits of life has brought about an improvement in their position, so that it is more appropriate to speak of serfs rather than of slaves." Okay, the greatest evil of slavery is slave raiding. Haile Selassie has fought this vigorously. He executes all slave raiders caught, but Ethiopia has been more successful against the bootlegging of slaves than the United States, with all its power and wealth, was against the liquor traffic. I don't know what else to say other than I rest my case closed. Hopefully Mr. Suubi, aka Mr. Vegas, was listening. Get in the comments, tell me how you feel, leave whatever references or comments you need to leave. Peace.